I have used Fitbit products since the original device here that came out in a form of a clip that you could wear on your belt or your waistband. Back in those days, it really didn't do much more than count steps and give you some very general insight on your sleep if you wore it in a wristband at night. But that thing started a fitness revival for me and probably thousands of others. I graduated through many different Fitbit products over the years, but I also tried products from a variety of other brands. I bought a used Garmin Fenix 4 watch and I fell in love with the durable build and all the extra details on my workouts and what those workouts are doing for my health. I tried out the Polar ecosystem with the Polar V3, and then when Android Wear, which is now Wear OS, came out, I tried a number of smartwatches including the original Moto 360 and the beautiful Huawei watch. I even ventured into the land of Suunto with their monster Suunto 7. But what I really wanted was a device that could accurately track my sleep, my exercise, my heart rate, especially heart rate variability, and give me general health insights and present that data in a simple but meaningful way. But I also wanted the benefits of a solid smartwatch operating system that would give me notifications and smart home controls and access to my two-factor authentication codes and have simple apps like weather and music on my wrist. And every product I tried seemed to compromise in some area. If it was good at fitness tracking, it was a bad smartwatch platform. Looking at you, Garmin. And if it was a good smartwatch platform, it was relatively bad at fitness tracking. Again, almost every Wear OS watch except this Suunto 7. But a few years ago, I gave up on trying to get what I wanted simply by wearing a smartwatch. I added the Oura Ring Gen 2 to my list of devices. I love the simplicity of the ring. I could wear it in place of my wedding ring and get reasonably solid sleep tracking. Well, at least better sleep tracking than what I was getting from my Garmin or my Wear OS watches. And I could get some decent insights on my general health with very good HRV tracking and a temperature sensor to help me know when I might be getting sick. And since I had the Gen 2, I was grandfathered in, so when the company finally started charging subscription fee, I didn't have to pay it. So now I could wear a smartwatch I liked, but I could still get some of the health tracking I wanted from the ring. But eventually, the ring started to fail me. Battery life took a massive hit, and I couldn't get through more than a day or two without charging it. But unfortunately, I had grown to really like the Oura app and its insights, so the best option was to move to the Gen 3 ring. But that meant sucking down the subscription fee. But at the time, there weren't really many other options for an Android user. I wasn't going to upend my entire life by switching wholeheartedly into the Apple ecosystem just to wear an Apple Watch that had aesthetics I didn't even like. It seemed cheaper to bite the bullet and pay the fee, so I upgraded to the Gen 3 ring and I moved on. But over time, other companies did start to pay more attention to the fitness and health features of their devices. I had been wearing a Garmin Venue 2 and then eventually a Venue 3 with my Oura ring, along with brief forays into Galaxy watches and Fitbits. But when Google unveiled the third generation of the Pixel Watch, I was finally interested enough to give it a try. It finally had more than a single day of battery life, solid sleep tracking and health features, interesting safety features, and it came in a larger size. I bought the LTE version and I was fully expecting to retire my Garmin Venue 3. But it didn't work out that way. I ended up wearing two watches because I preferred the exercise tracking and the morning report and the evening summary and the recovery tracking from my Garmin. But I liked the apps, the sleep tracking, and the expandability of my Pixel Watch. And I didn't want to give up either one. But now I was paying for a Fitbit subscription because I do sometimes do the workout videos, and I decided I needed to see if I could at least replace the Oura ring with another ring that didn't charge me a monthly fee and look at my own data. So after a long period of time of reading and watching reviews and reading and watching reviews and reading and watching reviews, I finally settled on the Ringcon Gen 2 and I bought that thing when it went on sale for Prime Day. So I've been using all four devices together for a few weeks now, and I've been comparing their stats every day to understand the differences in their tracking and to see if I feel comfortable letting go of the Oura ring, which has been my benchmark for all the others when it comes to sleep and recovery. I track the readiness scores, the sleep scores, the activity scores, the sleep times, the sleep stages, the overnight HRV, the resting and daytime average heart rates, the skin temperature, the respiratory rates, and the blood oxygen levels. And in most ways, the results were what I expected. Many fitness enthusiasts who pay attention to fitness influencers and gurus on YouTube have come to trust the quantified scientist for his detailed analysis of sleep and heart rate tracking. And if his extensive reviews are accurate indicators, we expect that the Apple Watch, most Fitbits, and the Oura Ring are best at sleep tracking. We also expect that the Apple Watch and most Fitbits are best at heart rate tracking, even during workouts. So if I generally treated my Oura and Fitbit results as benchmarks, then we would expect that Garmin would do worse at sleep tracking, and on and on and on. But I wanted to track this all for myself. So that's where data started coming. I took data from a little bit more than a week, and I dumped it in an Excel spreadsheet. And I uploaded that Excel spreadsheet to Perplexity, because, why not? We live in an AI world now. Let's see what Perplexity does with the data. And I asked it to prioritize sleep tracking and give me some summaries on how these 4 devices compare. And I'm going to share those results with you right now. So again, we're using the Oura Ring Gen 3, and to a lesser extent my Pixel Watch 3 powered by Fitbit as kind of benchmarks. And we're going to look at the Rincon Gen 2 and the Garmin Veni 3 and see how they all compare at some of these different stats that they track. So if we look at total sleep duration trends, they are actually fairly consistent. I have 3 sample nights here, where if we look at Oura and Fitbit, they're pretty close, 729, 738. Rincon's a little low at 7.5 and Garmin's a little high at 8.3. Next day, we've got Oura and Fitbit right together at 8.25. We've got Rincon pretty close at 8.17, and we've got Garmin a little off at 8.40. And that third day, 7.58 and 7.56 for Oura and Fitbit. Again, Rincon is reasonably close, 8 hours, 5 minutes, and then Garmin a little high at 8.20. Perplexity's summary for this was that Garmin logs the highest average total sleep, which is pretty much true here for these sample nights, and that Rincon and Fitbit are generally close in range. So okay, that's total sleep. We've got REM sleep, which again, this is now where you start to see a little bit more variances. We're using Oura and Fitbit kind of as our benchmarks. We've got the first night here with 2 hours 8 minutes with Oura and 1 hour 51 with Fitbit. Rincon coming in a little low at 1 hour 30. And Garmin coming in somewhere in between. This first night, Garmin doesn't actually seem to be too off. It's pretty close right there with Oura and Fitbit. The next night, we've got 2 hours 1 minute and 1 hour 58 with Oura and Fitbit. And these are all actually pretty good here, right? I'd say they're all pretty close. 2 hours 10 for Rincon, it's the highest. And 2 hours 3 with Garmin, which I'd say is right there. And that third night, 1 hour 39 for Oura, 2 hours 7 for Fitbit. And then we've got Rincon really going up. And we've got Garmin probably right in there, right? If Oura is at 1 hour 39, Garmin's at 1 hour 42. That's reasonable, right? Perplexity says that Rincon and Garmin consistently reported higher REM durations. Okay. Keep in mind, though, it's looking at multiple days of data, and I'm only showing you 3 samples here. For deep sleep, again, using Oura and Fitbit as our benchmarks, we've got 1 hour 36, 1 hour 24. Rincon is a little low at 1 hour 10. And Garmin, poor Garmin, this is where Garmin just really struggles. Deep sleep and Garmin do not get along. 37 minutes, just where does that even come from? The next night, maybe it's a little bit better because we've got 1 hour 24 on Oura, 1 hour 41 on Fitbit. We've got 2 hours 8 on Rincon, which is a little high. And we've got 1 hour 16 with Garmin, which is actually pretty close to Oura. And then this third sample night here, we've got 1 hour 41 on Oura, 1 hour 35 on Fitbit. But Rincon's hanging right in there with 1 hour 40. That's, I'd say, really good. And then Garmin again just going off the deep end with 40. Now, I think I don't know what Garmin is doing. Most nights look like the top line and the third line with Garmin just being dramatically lower for deep. I don't know why that is, but I know it and I expect it and I factor it into my analysis when I look at my Garmin scores every day. And again, Perplexity kind of summarizes that here across the 8 nights that it looked at. It says Rincon had the highest deep sleep variability, which kind of makes sense when we look at it here, and that Garmin's deep scores are consistently low, and that's true. That's true for me every night. It's always much lower than than Oura or Fitbit. Well, I say always, but pretty much always. Very consistent. So that's deep. With light and awake times, light sleep is where we spend most of our time, which, that's true. REM and deep are a smaller component of our overall sleep times. So what Perplexity summarized here is that Oura averages 40 minutes to an hour of awake. Rincon is usually only around 10 to 25. Fitbit usually goes a little bit higher than Oura with 50 plus minutes, and then Garmin's usually pretty low at 7 to 27. I can tell you from my own awakefulness during the night that probably Fitbit and Oura are right here. I do tend to wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes multiple times, and I'll be awake for minutes, 15, 20, sometimes even longer than that. So I tend to accept Fitbit and Oura's tracking when it comes here. The rings do tend to know when I'm awake. Rincon and Garmin, I would say, are off here. Most nights, I probably do spend more than 20 minutes awake. I don't know what exactly that is. I don't wear the Garmin and the Rincon on the same arm, so it's not movement. It just seems to be something different in the algorithms here, that they just both tend to see less awakefulness than the other devices. And then with the sleep scores, now keep in mind, if Garmin is consistently undershooting deep and has variability in REM, then you're going to expect to see lower sleep scores, because if it says you're not getting enough REM and you're not getting enough deep, that should reflect a lower sleep score. And we see that here with the averages, with Garmin averaging around 80, where the others are mid to high 80s. Now, even with that, I would say, based off of most nights of Garmin tracking, it should probably give me lower scores than it even does. I don't know if Garmin knows that their algorithm is a little sketchy when it comes to REM and deep, so it bolsters sleep scores a little bit to reflect that, or if their algorithm is just really truly using the sleep stages and just coming up with a score that's ever so slightly lower than the others. But they're all pretty close here. You see, again, that Rincon, which has more variance than Oura and Fitbit, reflects in a lower score. But again, I think it's close enough that in this particular case, you can use it. In the corporate world, we like to say things are directionally accurate, and I think it's directionally accurate most nights in terms of, did you get enough REM, did you get enough deep compared to the night before, compared to your average. And Perplexity again says that for Fitbit leads in sleep score consistency, which I think is true. It doesn't vary a lot unless I've slept really poorly, and that Garmin's scores reflect the lower average, which again I think is a sleep stage thing. Perplexity is noting that it's got the lowest average score, but it records the longest sleep times, which could seem puzzling again if you're not looking at the sleep stages, but we've seen the sleep stage variation and we know why it's giving the lower scores. So Perplexity summarized all this for me again, saying that the sleep score algorithms seem to differ notably across the devices. I would say that Fitbit and Oura are pretty similar. Most nights, Rincon is actually hanging in there pretty well with him, and Garmin is the most variation, especially with deep. It says that Rincon excels at detecting REM and deep stages, and I would say because Perplexity doesn't necessarily understand what the benchmarks are, it's just looking at REM and deep and saying, okay, Rincon is noticing more of that on average than the others. That may not be right. It's just noticing that that's the way it's calculating the stages. It says that, again, Garmin is giving you the longest sleep times, but it's giving you the lowest scores, and it's asking why. But we know why. It's because the sleep stages aren't being recorded accurately, and Garmin is using that data to say, okay, you didn't sleep as well, you could have used more REM, you could have used more deep. It says that Oura and Fitbit balance precision and recovery metrics. Okay, sure. I'm not even really sure where Perplexity is going with that, but they are pretty close most nights, and their trends are usually very on with each other. And then it notes that variability in wake detection affects the overall insights. And that's true. If you're awake more nights, that should reflect a lower score. So along with lower REM and lower deep, if you have more awake time, that should also reflect your scores. And remember that Garmin and Rincon tend to record less awake time than Oura and Fitbit. So those are the takeaways that Perplexity gave me. I also have a slide here with the different scores from 3 sample nights so we can see how they calculate readiness, what they record for HRV and resting heart rate, skin temperature, respiratory rate, and blood oxygen levels. And I would say for the most part, things are pretty close here. You will generally see variances in skin temperature with watches that you don't see with rings because they are different in how they're able to calculate that. I think that rings are a little bit better at skin temperature than watches. Even on the same arm, same finger, I think there's enough difference in how they're confused by the air, if that makes sense, like the ambient air in the room. So we can see that for the most part, temperature is, they're trending sort of in the same direction most nights. You will see that with the rings, they are always going in the same direction, I would say, but they are not as close to each other as the watches are most nights. Now, you will see even with the watches that there's variance. On the second night, you'll see that Fitbit showed a lower temperature from base, whereas Garmin shows a higher. That's kind of weird, but the differences in Oura and Rincon are also kind of weird. And I think probably across the board, Rincon is noticing ever so slightly lower temperatures than Oura. Again, I think the directions are pretty much the same. The trends are pretty much the same. But with the watches, you do see, and this is again just 3 sample nights, but I've seen nights where Fitbit and Garmin, one or both, will record higher temperatures. So you'll see a positive variation where the rings record negative variations. I just don't know that watches are super helpful in tracking skin temperature most nights unless you know that you're keeping your arms under the covers, close to your body, and you're not getting, any differences in the temperature of your room collected in those readings. I have respiratory rates shown here. I don't know how valuable they are, but as you can see that they don't vary very much. Blood oxygen levels. Oura is consistently high. I think I've seen other reviewers say that Oura is consistently high. They get 98, 99 on a regular basis, whereas you'll see lower numbers sometimes from the other devices. They're taking, again, measurements at points in time and they're averaging them out. I don't know if that's why there's differences, but you will see here that Oura is pretty much consistently higher than the others, but it's not super different. Most nights they're all pretty close like this. I think only once have I ever seen a variance, and I believe it was from Rincon, where it actually gave me a little alert and said, you might want to check your blood oxygen and see if you have sleep apnea, which surprised me because I never have seen anything like that before with any of the other devices. But the Rincon does offer sleep apnea detection, which I do not have turned on because I do not believe that I have sleep apnea, but it did note that one night. So maybe a little bit more variation on the Rincon, but from these numbers we can see it's pretty consistent with the other 3 devices. If you kind of throw out Oura as an outlier, they're all pretty consistent showing here. Now I want to talk a little bit about readiness scores because I don't trust readiness scores in general. And the reason why I say that is you'll see that some nights I get pretty decent scores, especially out of Oura. Oura typically gives me nice high scores in the 80s. Every once in a while give me a score in the 90s. And I don't wake up feeling that way. I pretty much wake up every morning feeling kind of tired, actually. And I don't know that Oura is accurately reflecting how I feel. Fitbit is kind of like the opposite, and it typically gives me readiness scores in the 60s most days. And if it gives me a score well above 70, then probably everything went right for me the day before. Nearly perfect sleep, nearly perfect activity, restful recovery, low stress, whatever the case. But Fitbit usually gives me pretty low scores. Now you'll see here that Rincon is kind of hanging in there with Fitbit. Rincon being the new player in my life. I kind of trust those two more than I trust Oura because, like I said, most days I feel kind of tired, even though I'm getting good sleep and my stress levels seem to be manageable. I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older. I don't know. Is it mental state? I have no idea what it is. These rings and watches can't really track your mental state, right? They can track stress, but that's a little bit different. So I tend to trust what Rincon and Fitbit are showing here, even though it is really pretty different from what you're getting from Oura and Garmin. I think probably trends over time will show similar trends, but just from scores, I do not trust Oura. I do not trust Garmin. Most days they're giving me scores that I just don't feel that way. Now, every once in a while, Oura will give me a lower score, and I feel fine, relative to how I feel every day. I feel fine. I feel normal. And I've noticed sometimes that's because I'm about to get sick. So sometimes it will give me lower readiness scores, even though HRV hasn't tanked and my sleep hasn't gone kind of off the rails yet. So I do think Oura can be a good, pre-alert kind of system for sickness, even before you're, and I say this specifically because I got sick last month, and I remember Oura was giving me lower scores, and I didn't understand it because my HRV was fine. And then 2 days later, I was sick. And then my HRV started to tank after I got sick. So sometimes the scores can be insightful, even though they don't seem insightful on that day. So even though Oura ranks me high most days, I do think its trends are, again, to use that stupid phrase, directionally accurate. So, again, I think that understanding the differences, even with the Garmin and its sleep tracking, deficits, and Rincon and its kind of, weird variability, I think that it's consistent enough in itself. Oh, and I did want to mention with HRV. The HRV scores you see from Rincon are consistently high compared to everything else, and that's every day. Every day it's like that. I don't think that it is wrong. I think that it is calculating HRV in a different way. Because again, when I look at everything in aggregate, it seems to be trending in the same direction that the Oura is trending. And it seems to be trending in the same direction that the Garmin is trending. And Garmin and Oura are pretty good at HRV. Fitbit's, it's a little off, but these numbers are really close most nights. But because I know that Rincon goes high, I really just pay more attention to the direction. Is it lower than yesterday? Is it lower than my average? So I know to factor that in moving forward, that it's going to give me higher numbers, but I still have Garmin. I know Garmin tracks you really close to Oura. And I still have Fitbit, and Fitbit tracks, reasonably close as well. So I will continue to monitor those trends and take that into account. It doesn't, for me, detract from the experience. If you're a person who's only wearing a Rincon, you may want to know that it's going to give higher numbers probably on average, and really pay more attention to the trends. I don't know what the method is for how these devices calculate HRV, but I do know there are a couple of different measurements that can be used, and Rincon may just be using a different one. So I'm not going to sit here and say it's wrong. I think that it goes in the right directions most days, but I did want to call out that it is notably higher than everything else on this page, and that is true every day, which is why I think it's just doing something different. So that's been my experience with these devices, and I do think that I'm going to be able to give up my Oura ring. I understand the variances of these other three devices, and I feel like I'm getting, good enough insights on my sleep and my HRV and my exercise and all of that to feel like I can let my beloved Oura ring go after many years of being in that ecosystem. And I hope that a look at this data helps you if you're looking at picking up a smartwatch or a ring. Know to pay more attention to trends and directions, and maybe not be hung up so much on the individual numbers. Or if you do want to be hung up on the individual numbers, just continue to compare them from day to day and just know, these numbers, all of this stuff is, these are devices that they're not medical devices. They're consumer level, consumer grade evaluation tools. and we should take them that way. But I think that you can get really good insights out of all of them. So I hope that this information helps you. And that's what I got. Thanks for watching.